Hello. Hi, Kevin.
Hi,
Hello. Hi, Kevin.
how are you?
How are you?
Very
I'm
well,
good.
thanks.
Thank you for
Good.
taking the time out, Kevin.
You're welcome.
Nice to have you with us. Right. So I think we can get started.
Fine.
Uh, Other people might join in between. That is fine. So yeah. I was going through your website of Carbon Lights, and it was interesting to see what you have been doing in the waste management space and circular economy. Right. So for everyone's benefit and for a general overview, just wanted to have a brief background around what you're doing and how you're doing it.
Okay. So, whilst in one way you might argue we're in the waste management business, and of course we are, but really the business that we're in and we've always been in is the carbon emission reduction business. So we set up as a company back in the UK back in 2009, and then in 2012 my co-founder came back to his native Bangalore, and we set up Carbon Masters India. And in the UK, we had been doing carbon management advisory services. We basically advise companies how to measure their carbon footprint and take steps to reduce it. And we did that quite successfully, not only in UK and Europe, but across Latin America. So we came to Bangalore and naively, this was in 2012, thought we could do the same thing. But back then, there were not many companies remotely interested in measuring their carbon footprint, much less paying anybody for it. So we thought, well, if Indian clients would not buy advice, would they buy a solution? So we looked at wind and we looked at solar. We predicted back then that they would be as big as they are now today, but we didn't think we could add any value. And somewhat serendipitously, we were looking at a briquettes factory that was owned by a chicken farmer that had built the very first biogas plant in southern India, where it also bought a piece of purification technology. I say bought because that's all he'd done. He'd never managed to stitch the two together. So we came across that plant back in 2013, 2014, and we could see, had he been successful at doing what he wanted to do, he would be taking essentially an agricultural waste like chicken dung, or indeed what we specialise now is the organic fraction of municipal solid waste. We put that in a biogas digester, which is nothing new in India. I often tell people the very first biogas plant in the world was actually built in India in a leper colony in Maharashtra in about 1857. So a bit like yoga, India gave biogas to the world. So, but the new thing was, using that purification technology, you can take the methane content in the raw biogas, which is caused in the digester, and you can upgrade it or purify it, and you can get the methane content up north of 94, 95%. And then what we do is we after purification, we compress that gas into specially designed cylinders and cascades, which we ship to restaurants to displace LPG for cooking. Now, we brand that product and we call it Carbon Lights. And then we take the nutrient slurry from the digester and we bring in other biomass, principally with the municipal solid waste stream, the garden waste that all cities are generating. And we build big 6-foot windrow compost tubes and we spray the slurry on that and let that aerobically decompose over the next 30 to 45 days. Then we sieve the product, and before packing it, we add a biofertilizer consortia that we've developed. So the combination of a nutrient-rich slurry, windrow composting with greens and browns from the garden waste, combined with our biofertilizer, gives us an outstanding organic manure. It's licensed under the Fertiliser Control Order as a bio-enriched organic manure, and we sell that to farmers to put carbon back in the soil. So back to my carbon point, we think a biomethanization plant, by taking organic waste streams and converting that into two climate-friendly products, which we do, is the best carbon mitigation solution probably available in the world today. Now, we are biased, but the reason we say that, for every tonne of municipal solid waste that we don't process. It'll probably most time end up in a landfill, where it will decompose and release methane, which is a toxic greenhouse gas, with a global warming potential of about 32 over 20 years. But over the next 10 years, we'll have a global warming potential north of 80. So we capture that methane in the biogas, and then we sell that to displace another fossil fuel, LPG. And we're also looking now at industries and displacing diesel with it as well, because our biomethane has applications for commercial cooking, for transport, and for backup power. So it reduces carbon because the CO2 that's released from our biomethane is what's called biogenic. It doesn't add to the climate stocks because it's only releasing the CO2 that was taken out of the atmosphere when that organic material was alive. So it's carbon neutral. And then with our carbon light fertilizer, we're actually addressing, which I would argue is a second climate crisis, and that's the crisis of the absence of the deterioration of soil carbon in agricultural soils worldwide, particularly exacerbated in India because you're between the tropics. So the temperatures here in India drive a lot of carbon out of that soil. So an average soil, a healthy soil, should have about 5% soil organic matter. There's no soil in India with more than 0.3%. And unless we fix that by putting much more carbon back in the soil, we're going to end up with dirt or desertification, where we won't be able to grow anything. So in a way, we think our carbon light solution solves three very, very big problems. Methane mitigation from landfill, the burning of fossil fuels that impacts climate, and putting carbon back in the soil to make the soil healthier so it can along with other activities, provide more sustainable agriculture, reduce the amount of chemical fertilizers that farmers need to put in their soil, as well as saving more carbon.
Right. So, like coming to the point wherein you say that your products are carbon light and climate friendly. So, where does your maximum environmental impact come from? Is it from the procurement side in terms of reutilizing the waste, or is it in the production cycle wherein you're producing those fertilizers, or in the end stream and in the end user stream wherein they are using those recycled waste products, thereby helping in?
It's across the whole piece, really. So by taking organic waste that would have, if we hadn't taken it, end up in a landfill, we're saving methane. Then we create two products, both of which can address the climate by displacing a fossil fuel for heating, backup power, or transport. You can put it in a vehicle. We have a fleet of vehicles running on our gas. So we're delivering our gas in vehicles running on our gas. So we're not using diesel at all. So we're saving carbon that way. And then with the fertilizer, we're putting carbon back in the soil. And if you put carbon back in the soil, it can't get emitted as CO2. Plus, I mean, chemical fertilizers are one of the most carbon and energy intensive products available in the world today. So for every ton of fertilizer that gets displaced by using our organic fertilizer, we're saving anywhere from 6 to 7 tons of CO2e. So across the piece, a larger scale biogas plant can save thousands and thousands of tons of CO2e. And it doesn't stop there. It also creates jobs. And it creates jobs for people in rural communities, semi-rural and urban communities, and across the skill set, from unskilled labour to skilled labour to very skilled labour. So it's creating jobs, improving the environment, and saving carbon. So it has a lot of co-benefits. As well as, from India's perspective, stopping the import of expensive fossil fuels. You're creating your own energy, as well as creating an organic fertilizer that can assist farmers in reducing the amount of chemical fertilizers that they're currently using. So we'd argue right across the piece, from bringing the waste in, processing it, producing the two products, selling, marketing and distributing the products, all in total saves carbon.
Right. So compared to the traditional fertilizers that is used in farming, and maybe compared to, for example, the LPG or the gas being used in restaurants. So to what extent have you been able to replace that with your products?
Very much so. So today we have we have about 8 carbon lights factories across 3 states, and we're selling our gas to around 50 or 60 customers every single day, because we deliver it direct to the customer, take the empty cascades away as we replace them with full ones. So we've been selling our gas between 50 and 60 customers across 3 states for the last 2 or 3 years. So we're displacing a significant amount of LPG. What's holding us back is we don't have enough capacity, and we're looking to raise investment so we could build more carbon lights plants and create more gas and fertiliser and sell that. And we're working between 2,000 or 3,000 farmers at the moment. We either work directly with farmers, because as well as the solid product, we also take that nutrient-rich digestate slurry. We put that in a tanker, also a CNG tanker, which can run on our gas, and we take that out to farmers' fields, and we spray that on the field just ahead of planting. So we sell both the liquid product and the solid product. So that's what we're doing today.
Okay. So in terms of the economic advantages for your target customers, be it the restaurants or the farmers, how are they impacted economically through your price points or in terms of usage? So for example, they might be using some amount of fertilizers for their piece of land. So compared to that, how are they impacted in terms of the financial
Fine. So
cost
the
that they're
value,
incurring?
fine, great question. So the value proposition for carbon lights CBG, or compressed biomethane, is that a couple of characteristics really. First of all, LPG is a liquid. There's liquid at the bottom of that cylinder.
All right.
So any customer cannot, unless some customers do this, very few, invest in pumps to get out the last remaining bit of gas. But most customers, commercial customers who are using LPG, can't use all the gas in the cylinder. And it varies about how much gas will be left in the cylinder when they hand it back to the distributor. At 98% methane purity, which is what we're shipping today, biomethane has around a 6% gross calorific value higher than LPG. But I think the really thing that we discovered quite early on, when chefs cook with LPG, as they use the cylinder, the pressure drops. So chefs don't like doing that, but up until now, there's never been any alternative or anything better, because we've seen chefs in big hotels get the boy to change the cylinder when it's half full, because they want the pressure. When you use our gas, because we are packing it at a very much higher pressure, because the physics of methane is we need to compress at around 198 bar pressure, which is very, very high pressure. Then we ship it to the customer in these specially designed cascades, and we leave it outside the restaurant for safety reasons, and we reduce the pressure through a pressure regulation system that we've developed. So it goes into the kitchen anywhere from 4 bar to 2 bar. But because it's got a very high pressure and it's 100% gas, there's no liquid in our cylinders at all. Methane is a fully 100% gas. It burns at a constant pressure throughout the cooking process. So that was where, when we first tested it, chefs love cooking with our gas, because it cooks more efficiently than LPG at a constant pressure. From a cost point of view, we always price our product anywhere from 3 to 5% cheaper than LPG, but our customers are getting savings of anywhere from 10, 15, and some of even 20% when they convert from using LPG to our carbon lights. And that's fairly significant in a restaurant where the cost of energy, particularly today, when the cost of energy has gone through the roof almost, getting any savings in your energy bill is significant for them, which is why, in 5 or 6 years that we've been selling the product, we've never really lost a customer because they're dissatisfied with the product or the pricing of the product. That's just not happened. Now, on the fertilizer side, fertilizer is a lot more challenging, and that's because the environment of agriculture is challenged. For all agricultural input manufacturers, selling into the agricultural sector is challenged because 75% of farmers in India are marginal farmers. They're barely making enough to coexist. So they can't really afford the cost of inputs. And they're very prone to the climate changes which affect their crop yields. But one important barrier is the fact that the government subsidises chemical fertilisers to an enormous extent. I mean, the subsidy bill last year for chemical fertilisers totaled 35 billion US dollars, which is more money than India spends on its entire health department or its education. Now, all agriculture in the world has subsidies. I'm not arguing there shouldn't be subsidies. I'd argue over the extent of that subsidy. Because to give you an example, a bag of urea today should cost, for a 45 kg bag, should cost 2,500 to 3,000 rupees. It's selling in the market today from 250 to 300. That difference is made up by the government of India, not paying to the
Right.
farmer, but paying to the chemical fertiliser manufacturer. And I think that's
Right.
not sustainable. The government knows it's not sustainable, but it's a very, very difficult and challenging issue to address. Politically, it's very difficult to say to
Right.
your vote base, I'm going to charge you more for urea. So that's one of the challenges. And it's a barrier now to stopping farmers buying the right amount of organic product to put back in the soil. Historically, you know, they've used chicken dung or cow dung as a fertiliser, but the amount of cow dung available now is very variable. Farmers sometimes just can't get hold of it. So they're then forced to try and make some kind of compost on site using their own agricultural waste. The efficacy of that, again, is very variable. So that's some of the challenges that's in the farming sector. And meanwhile, there's no question, you don't use an organic fertiliser to improve the yield of your product because you need much higher quantities of nitrogen, potassium and phosphorus than we have in our organic manure. What our organic manure has is other very useful nutrients along with carbon. We have magnesium and boron and zinc, which are very, very necessary micronutrients to provide increased soil health and fertility. And increasing the water retention in the soil. All of those benefits get accrued by putting a good quality organic manure into the soil, which is what we argue you do when you're using carbon lights.
Right. So you had mentioned that, like, I understand that government subsidies being provided to traditional fertilizers might be a challenge in penetrating the market, especially in the agricultural segment. So you are, I think you're currently bootstrapped, right? You're looking to raise funds to expand the uh, factories and the setups, manufacturing plants at your end, right?
Yeah, we
So,
started off being bootstrapped. We've had investors.
okay,
We've probably had investment close to $2 or $3 million up until now. We've had a group of angel investors from the Indian Angel Network and Sangam Ventures, which is a climate tech VC. They were early seed investors. We've subsequently had investments from the Native Angel Lead Network, which is an angel network based in Tamil Nadu. And recently we got an investment from another impact fund called Schneider Electric Energy Asia Fund. So what we're looking now is to close a round of another $3 million so that we could begin taking the number of plants that we operate up a bit more so that we can produce even more carbon lights to sell down the two channels that we've developed.
right, okay. So what kind of, like, you have built the entire supply chain at your end, right? From identifying the points of waste generation to collecting that waste and then recycling it down to the on the downstream side, building up the distribution network and everything. So on the upstream side, are there any specific types of waste that you focus on procuring that can help you in building
Well,
in producing
the
products?
beauty of our model is because we're focusing on the organic fraction of municipal solid waste, we don't actually procure that. We don't pay for it. But what we
Okay.
do is partnering with a company that I believe you're talking to after me, Hasudra Innovations. Now, they are a waste management company that collects and transports waste from bulk generators across Bangalore. So by partnering with them, as we have done, we've actually formed a joint venture with them, which has built one of our large plants out in Harley. But what that means, their expertise is with their model, which they'll tell you all about, is that they collect separated waste from apartment blocks, temples, IT parks, and they have a very innovative model where they use rag pickers in an entrepreneurial model where they sign the contract with the apartment block or the temple or the business or the IT park, and they charge a tipping fee for collection, transport, and processing. They allow the rag picker to upcycle and recycle the dry waste. The challenge they had as a business was, what do they do with the wet waste? So we provide in our factories a destination for that wet waste. So the beauty of the arrangement is, what they do is what they do best. They are in the collection, the transportation of separated waste streams. By providing a destination for their wet waste, that's good because it's sustainably processed, and that means that they can offer that service to more and more customers, because the wet waste is the challenge. The dry waste can be upcycled, recycled, or put through a material recovery facility. And that's reason, although it's informally organised, it is organised. The challenge is the wet waste. And they can either send it to a landfill, which they don't want to do, or they can send it for composting, but there's a charge for that usually. So by working together, we are guaranteed a regular supply of good quality separated waste. And that's very important, because the thing that's bedeviled this technology really taking off is to get the right quality of separation in that wet waste. Because if you bring in mixed waste, we've either got to separate it in the plant, in which the plant ends up looking like a landfill, and we don't get a very good quality of gas or a very good nutrient-rich sludge out of it. So by combining with Hasudra, leveraging their strengths, we'll be able to combine together, and then we do what we do best. We can design plants, operate plants, and then sell, market, and distribute the two outputs. So the two companies working together, I think, is still quite unique in India, but I think that it's a very innovative total model which works for both parties and actually addresses and solves the issue.
Okay, all right. So coming to your part wherein you said that you're planning to raise more funds to further scale up the operations. So what's the timeline and the cost of setting up a plant at your end at a given location and making it functional there?
Right. So broadly speaking, and I think this has been a learning, our plants are generally on the smaller side in terms of overall capacity. The largest plant we have is the one we built with Hasudra, which today has the capacity to process up to 50 tonnes of the organic fractional municipal solid waste a day. And that therefore will produce close to 1 tonne or 1.5 tonnes of gas and around 5 tonnes of solid fertiliser a day. But what we've learnt is that we need larger plants, because larger plants will give you the scale efficiency. So
right.
We're looking to expand our plants now so the minimum output would be 5 tonnes of gas. Now, the good news is the Indian government has recognised what a large-scale CBG industry, the benefits of that to India are considerable. And what's given them confidence in that is actually the story that they've achieved now with bioethanol. The government took a decision some 12 years ago to get bioethanol blending to reduce the amount of petrol coming into the country. And we were going to conferences about 5 or 6 years ago when the target for that was 5%, and the country wasn't even delivering 1.5%. This year, India will blend nearly 15% of all the petrol with bioethanol, and it will achieve its 20% target in the next 2 years. Now, if you think about that, that means 20% of the rupees that you're converting to dollars to go out of the country to buy petrol are no longer doing that. And where is that money going? It's going to the sugar industry, because the sugar industry produces bioethanol from the raw materials of manufacturing sugar. So there's a virtual circle there. You cut down your import bill and you put money back through the agricultural sector, which lifts incomes of all the farmers. So they're seeing the same virtual circle can now be created with CBG. So in the past 18 to 24 months, the government has passed a raft of very favourable policies which encourage you to build a CBG plant, to either put it in the emerging city gas distribution pipelines, or to provide it to the state-run petrol OMCs, that's BPCL, HPCL, GAIL, and provide it as a transport solution in their bunks by a big policy called SATAP. So the government is really leaning forward to try and make CBG a success because the benefits for India are really significant. You wean yourself off the high cost of foreign oil. You also produce a biofertilizer which puts carbon back in the soil and improves your soil health. You create employment indigenously across India, as well as improving your energy security, and above all, reducing your carbon footprint from our point of view. And that will also help India on its journey now towards net zero emissions. And I'd argue they can pull this off. I mean, India's growing, even today, under whatever government's in power, it's managing to grow about 5 to 6% every single year. I think if they can pull off a biofuels policy that adds to bioethanol, also has a big CBG business, also builds a big hydrogen business, moves more to electric cars, then I think you'll find that the growth rate for GDP in India will almost match the 20 years that we saw in China. I think that's the real prize, and then that will lift all boats, that level of GDP growth. Because with a biofuels policy, the major benefits are going to be the agricultural sector, or indeed cleaning up all the garbage in our cities.
Right. So I think we are almost done with the time. Just a couple more questions, a couple more minutes.
Sure.
And so lastly, in terms of the challenges that you have faced in your journey over the last 12 years, as of in today's times, do you think any partnerships or support can help scale up the operations and realize your future visions over the next 3 to 5 years?
Absolutely. I mean, we've realised in retrospect, one of the biggest challenges, of course, is what are we trying to do here? We're trying to ape a Shell, a BP, an Exxon, an Adani, a Reliance. So these are huge companies with huge amount of resources that we don't have as a startup. But we're essentially trying to do the same thing. We're in the energy business. We're in the low carbon energy business, and that's very, very capital intensive. I mean, the typical cost of a plant that could produce 5 tons of gas would be of the order of about 35 to 40 crore, excluding the land costs. Now, that will pay out, but that's a big amount of capital. Now, in relation to a bioethanol plant or a petroleum cracking plant, it's pretty small, but it's still a big investment. So that's one of the big challenges, is raising money. Now, we've been fortunate to be able to keep going with the money we are raising, but we will need significant capital if we want to scale this business. And we're not necessarily going to be able to do that on our own. And we've learned already, we've had to build partnerships. The partnership we have with Asudra is an excellent one, and that's a very necessary part of it. We are looking to partner with other people. We actually, once we've got the model more robustly delivered, we think it could be a big franchise opportunity, where we could get people, young entrepreneurs or not so young entrepreneurs, who might want to get into this business. We could help them with that. We could help them with sorting out the land. We could help them with provision of the technology, with the training in able to run that plant, as well as selling, marketing the gas. So we're looking at that to see to what extent we could make this model franchisable, so that we could seek more help and assistance from entrepreneurs across India to be able to scale it more rapidly.
All right. So lastly, on the technology part, again, going back to that. So have you worked towards patenting your process and technology to stay ahead of the competition or new companies that might plan to enter into this space?
No, I think part of the issue around the patent laws is that if you've got it in them, and we have to take our technology to the marketplace to generate revenue because we're a startup. The minute it's out in the market, you can't patent it. It has to be, so there's a bit of a catch-22 in that. On the other hand, we've used up until now indigenous Indian technology. Some of that's okay. There is far better technologies, but they're usually from Germany, and they're very much more expensive than Indian technologies. So we do use German technologies. We only use German compressors because we've learned, yes, you pay far more for a German compressor, but it never breaks down as much as an Indian compressor does. Even though you can buy an Indian compressor very cheaply, it doesn't help you when it breaks down and it takes 4 or 5 days to get it fixed. Because what we've also learned very early on in the business, when I'm supplying a restaurant with gas, that's mission critical. Without gas, he has no business, right?
Right.
So I've got to be able to supply him gas. I cannot have downtime in my plants. I've got to run them, 7 days a week, and I've got to be producing the gas. So that's what we learned quite early on. Now, I think there's overall, the CBG industry is still in its infancy, okay? So we've got a lot of new technologies to improve upon. The biggest one, which we are working on improving with a local Indian manufacturer, is the purification technology. That's a challenge for everybody. Getting the right purity of gas and not having it leak methane. So we are working with a Hyderabad company now that's been in the gas separation business, but for oxygen and nitrogen for about 30 years. We're working with them to develop a system which we're currently testing in our Harahali plant to separate the CO2 from the methane in the raw biogas. And that's giving us at the moment excellent results. So that's a bit of in-house technology development with a partner that we've done to come up with what we think is a superior technology made in India, which can compete with some of the technologies that are available in Europe. But ultimately, we need to persuade, and it's a challenge, and I've tried this by going to conferences in Europe, to get these European manufacturers to come to India with their technology and build their technology here in India. But that's the real challenge at the moment, because
Right.
too many of them have grown up with a mentality, no, I export. But I frankly think in most fields, that's not going to happen in India. The way of being successful in India now is you have to come to India, you have to invest in India, you have to hire Indian people, and you have to make product in India. Not just because of Make in India, but fundamentally that's the only way you're going to build a successful long-term business. And we see that already with the companies, the big companies, foreign companies that are here. They're not here by export, they're here because they put boots on the street, they've invested, and they've built businesses here in India. And that's ultimately what the CBG industry will have to try and attract more of these foreign companies with excellent technology to come to India and build those technologies. It's another area I think the government could help in thinking about forming like a manufacturing hub for CBG technologies and making incentives to bring foreign technology and get people to make it here in India. But again, we're in the infancy and the industry is just starting. But I think that will come in the next few years.
Right. So it's a long drawn process, and I understand that people have to make the right push and sustained efforts, and they might start seeing the results. It will take time, but they'll start seeing the results down the line.
Absolutely.
Right.
Well, it took 12 years to achieve this 15% target, but they have done it.
Right.
That's the point.
Right.
And that's having
Right.
enormous benefits right across the value chain. And CBG will be the same. This is not a get-rich-quick business. You have to be patient. But the problem's so big, this is a real solution to the 3 big problems I was speaking about. So this is well worth taking the time to make it happen and make it happen in India.
Right. So, like, from your vision, long-term vision perspective, which other markets or geographies do you think, or do you plan to enter into in the next maybe 5 years, or in the next again 10 years, that you think you
Well,
would want to be?
the opportunities in India are significant. We're only in 3 states. We'd like to be in many, many more. But the whole of Southeast Asia is an opportunity here, largely because up until now, they're all using LPG for cooking because they haven't put piped gas infrastructure. It's happening, and it's even happening in India, but it'll be a very slow process, largely because that we have a big gas grid across Europe and North America, but that's principally because we use gas for heating. India doesn't need gas for heating. The temperature here, you don't need it.
Right.
So the economics of building a pipeline are very challenging when all you're getting is the cooking. So it will work in cities where they're close together. So that's why they're putting city gas distribution networks into cities. But the India will still be challenged. 600 million people in India don't live in cities. They live in small towns and smaller towns and villages where they're only using 2 cylinders of LPG a day for various reasons. And the rest of the time they're still burning coal or firewood, with disastrous health habits. So there's a major challenge for India how we get the rural community even off the two cylinders and get them into low carbon gas. Now that's a very big challenge economically that we're going to have to address as chapter 2. The first instance is to build a large scale CBG industry across India in the way that we're doing currently. And if that's generating sufficient cash flows, then we can start to looking at taking on the rural communities and get those into pipe gas. And I believe there are ways that we could do that without significant increases in capital costs for the pipeline guys. But, that's an issue down the road.
Right.
But generally speaking, I think the prognosis is very good for India because the big players are moving in now. I mean, Adani are investing millions in this category now, as are Alliance, as are a company called EverEnviro. So, the government set a target. It wants to achieve 5,000 CBG plants by 2030. Now, it's way behind that at the moment, largely because of COVID and some other issues about a baby industry. But I think we're going to see at least 200 or 300 more plants, literally within the next 12 or 24 months. And then I think we're going to, once people realise that this is the way forward, it'll accelerate a bit like the bioethanol program did, and we're going to see, the industry, growing quite significantly.
Right. Thank you so much, Kevin, for taking the time out. It was really interesting to see what you have been doing at Carbon Lights and how India fits into your entire vision of building a sustainable and environmental friendly business solution to the energy needs of the population.
Thank you very much indeed. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye.
Very much.